Today we are talking public speaking tips to hook any audience. Now, you know, public speaking has long been one of the things that people most fear. Can you believe it? Public speaking out of all things. It's not easy to stand up and talk in front of people, whether it's 5, 50, or 500. And any and all tips are greatly appreciated. But before we dive in, welcome to the bandwidth. I'm Rosie, your video coach, and I help women over 40 connect with their audience and go live. If you find value in this video, give it a thumbs up. Check out some of my other videos. Subscribe to the channel if you have not, and hit that notification bell. Let's do this. So again, the title of this show is Public Speaking Tips to Hook Any Audience. Our guest is Ian Tyson. He is a motivational speaker. Welcome to the bandwidth.
Thank you so much, Rosie. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you for joining us. So can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background?
Sure. Well, I've been working as a motivational speaker in the educational field and for corporates and conferences and things like that for 32 years now. Yikes. I started when I was 18 years old, straight out of high school, was speaking all through university as kind of a side gig. And then it just kind of became my passion and what I do. I do that along with, I do cooking segments and things like that online because I'm a passionate home cook. Also a bit of I do a lot of hosting at conferences and things like that. And yeah, this is what I do. This is what I love. I love being in front of people. And over the last, 16, 17 months, it's being in front of people on camera and going live, as you talked about. And there are certainly some advantages and disadvantages to it, but I'm just grateful to still be able to do this and connect with people every day.
Wonderful. So why do you think it's the most feared?
It is an interesting thing. And it's funny. I've talked to people a lot over the years. People will ask that question, like, I'm terrified. I don't know, like I speak a lot at schools, high schools over the years has been one of my main markets. And, I'll be talking to a student before a show who's going to introduce me and they're like shaking in their boots and just don't want to get up there and do this thing. And the thing I tell them was from an article I read ages ago, early in my speaking career, that talked about they had done a physiological study, like the doctors had studied the human body and the body's reaction to fear and excitement are exactly the same. So if you love roller coasters and you're clicking up that first hill and your palms are sweating and your stomach's going, and you're like, yes, and you're so excited. But if you hate roller coasters, you're going up that first hill, the palms are sweating, the stomach's going, you're going, no, 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 no. The body is reacting in exactly the same way. So it becomes a mental choice for me. Am I afraid or am I excited? Excited gives me an edge. Excited means I'm pumped up and ready to do this thing I'm going to do. Fear you want to run away from. So it becomes this mental choice. I mean, when I'm about to step on stage anywhere, it doesn't matter if I'm speaking to 10 people or, largest crowd I ever did was just under 6,000.
Oh, wow.
It doesn't matter the size of the audience, no matter who it is. I am still backstage kind of, sort of shaking it out a little bit and I still get those butterflies. The day those butterflies are gone, I'm going to be concerned because that maybe means I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get to that point. So if you care about what you're doing, you're not afraid, you're excited because there's a way to turn that around. Because it's that old, I think it was a Jerry Seinfeld joke that public speaking was the number one fear. Death was number two. And so I think his joke was, so you're saying at a funeral, you'd rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy. So, and but I don't get I don't get afraid, but I get excited before every show, every single time.
Yeah. And I haven't, had that wide of an audience like you, 6,000, but I agree with you. When the nerves go, that means, you have to start worrying because I feel your heart is not in it. The ego may be taking over or whatever it may be. So
that's the edge. That's the juice you need to kind of keep going, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah. So what is the best way to captivate your audience?
I mean, there's lots of flashy, showy things certainly that you can do, but in my humble opinion, after 32 years of doing this, I think nothing will captivate an audience more than authenticity.
Mhm.
If it doesn't come across that you believe in what you're talking about, that you are being your true self, people can smell a salesperson from a mile away. And if they sniff that out, oh, they're checked out, they're done. Or if it's just somebody putting on a little dog and pony show for them and doing their thing, you people lose that too. Like you're going to lose them. But if you come across as authentic in the stories you tell and the way that you present, and it doesn't come across as too forced. I mean, yes, you want to be rehearsed, you want to be tight in what you do, but you don't want it to feel rehearsed. What I love is if I, especially when the times that I've worked in the educational market and I would go to a conference, or if I go to a school, say, every 4 or 5 years, and there would be teachers there that would see me every 4 or 5 years. And if the schools brought me back for the same presentation, we want you to tell these stories. I love hearing from a teacher afterwards. Every time I hear you, it's like the first time. That's the highest compliment that I can get, because it feels fresh. It feels authentic, because I think nothing will captivate an audience more than authenticity, without a doubt.
Yeah. And just like with me, with, talking about going live, it does get, stale after a while because you're talking about the same thing and re-emphasizing the thing over and over again. But what I find is, sometimes when someone listens to it again, they get something different, like you said, and it's all the way that you spin it and add new content. Something else may have happened. So that's what I always try to tell our audience, just to, like you said, keep it fresh. Switch it up some, because it can be like, oh my God, going live again. How many ways can you say it? But I feel like so many people don't listen to it, don't get it the first time. So they have to hear it 2 or 3 times to
Well, I
let
mean,
it
look,
sink in anyway.
in this age of streaming and everything that we have, there is a reason we watch movies that we love more than one time. There is a reason we watch TV shows more than one time. There is a reason we listen to songs we like. You don't hear a massive hit song one time and go, yeah, okay, yeah, I'm good. I don't need to hear that anymore. You play it again and again, because every time you get some nuance. And so if you're going live and you're doing something for yourself, for a brand, for a product, whatever it may be, telling your stories, the stories you're telling have to be your favorite songs. You want to hear them again and again, and find and eke out some more nuance out of them every time you tell them.
Yeah. So okay, so if someone is really, really, really nervous, like what are some tips that you can give them to overcome that nervousness and, be good on stage?
Well, there's many different schools of thought. I mean, the old one that's kind of a bit of an urban myth is, oh, just picture the audience naked. That's not good for anybody. Don't be doing that, because there may be times you're like, oh, this is very pleasant, and then you go, oh, geez, that's not for me. I remember being given, geez, I must have been 10 years old. And a woman was at one of our neighbors. She was running a fashion show for the local mall, and they were doing kids' clothes, and asked me to be in it. And I was terrified to go up and walk this T and go side to side. And she took me and sat me down backstage, because there was, several hundred people out there. And I was absolutely freaking out as a little 10-year-old me. And she said, straight at the end of their runway, what do you see? And I said, people. She said, no, beyond that. And I said, it's a pet store. And she said, what's to the right? That's an eyeglasses store. And what's to the left? Oh, that's a clothing store. She said, when you walk up, you look at the sign for the pet store. You walk towards that, you smile, you look at the eyeglasses store, you smile, you turn, you look at the clothing store, you smile, and you come back. And then that was one of my biggest lessons, because every single person, my folks, my neighbors, all came up after us. Oh, it was so great. It was like you were looking right at us. No, I was looking just over their heads.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're doing a big room, I mean, virtual is certainly a whole different animal, and we can talk about that. But if you're in a big room of people, looking just over the top of everybody's head, depending on if you're into a group of say 100 or more, look just over the top of everybody's head. They're going to feel connected to you. Smaller group, look, you're going to have to make eye contact. But that's why if you go up, you're vulnerable, you're authentic, you share yourself in the way that you're presenting, that can disarm things. I always start with humor because that disarms me. It kind of shakes the nerves out because I get that laugh. I'm like, okay, they're with me. And it also can help win that audience over. I've always been, someone who studied a lot of stand-up comedy. When I was a kid, I would obsess over it and take it all in. And so I like kind of to craft something to bring people in those first few minutes. And that can help to disarm the audience a little bit and also help me to just kind of relax into it. Set yourself a benchmark to just, okay, I'm going to round that corner and then I'm going to be okay. But know that given what you've said about, it being the top fear for so many people, absolutely everybody in that room, pretty much to the person, is so glad it's you up there and not them. So they're going to give you that love
Yeah.
because they're like, but you go, you do this. I don't want to be the one up there. I am here to support you. So people are going to be empathetic to your plight, and showing a little bit of nerve isn't necessarily a bad thing. Showing a little bit of emotion, it's authentic, it's real, and people will be so much more forgiving if you're being your real and true self. Absolutely.
Okay. So, what are some recommendations to start? A lot of people say if you belong to a church, do a church, or, what would you suggest to start out?
To start, as far as starting out to find an audience or to start to build material? Well, I'm not, tell
To
me what you
start
mean.
out to get your nerves together for public speaking.
Oh, sure,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I get a lot of young speakers and people entering the business that I talk to and try and coach because of just the amount of time I've been in this. I always tell them, yeah, get up in front of anybody who will let you get up in front of them. If it's going in and talking to your kids' class, whether they're little ones or big ones, talk to a college, a university, see if there's a class that kind of applies to the thing you want to talk about. Look, I'll come in, I'll do this for free. If it's at a church, if it's at a Kiwanis meeting, a Knights of Columbus, any type of, group like that, like a public service group, and anything at all. Anybody that will allow you to stand up and put a mic in your hand and be in front of them. My first several years of speaking, I didn't really get paid.
Mhm.
I mean, my first gig, I was 18 and they gave me $75, which it was $75. I mean, I was 18. I was thrilled to get it. Let's be real. But that wasn't a lot. And honestly, probably until I was in my early 20s, I was just getting expenses. If I had to drive there, I would get fuel, or I'd get, take a train or whatever it may be, and maybe some meal expenses. That was really it. I just wanted to get up and take swings. That's what I'm always about, whether it's, building new businesses for myself or trying out new material. Am I going up and taking swings? And the more it's like with, not that I'm a big baseball guy or anything, but the more at bats you do, it's practice. Everything is practice, practice, practice. When you think about it in the stand-up comedy world, everybody in stand-up has to go to an open mic night and try it in front of 3 people in a bar that don't want to hear you or don't think you're funny. The failures are going to teach you a lot more than the successes are. Silence in a room teaches you a lot more than uproarious applause will. And how you cope and deal with that silence is going to teach you so much more. Absolutely. But yeah, if you're starting out, figure out what you want to say. Don't just, I'm just going to get up there and do this thing. Now, you gotta prepare, but just look for an audience wherever you can find them. Absolutely.
Okay. And so, what is more important, your content or delivery?
It's such an interesting question. What I would say, and it kind of relates to the authenticity piece that I was talking about a few minutes ago, I think an audience will always be more forgiving of your delivery if your content is good. If your delivery is excellent, you may get a really good response in the room, but half an hour later, they're not going to remember who you were because there was no content that would stick with them. If you had a rough time, you were kind of trying to figure it out and a little rough around the edges in your presentation style and everything else, but the content is solid. The stories were good. You were just being authentic. An audience will always be forgiving if they're getting something from you. I
Mhm.
mean, I know speakers in the industry that I work in over these years that, and people who have come and talked to me like, yeah, oh yeah, I saw that person speak. What they talk about? Yeah, I don't know, because they were great and they may have been engaging in the room and in the moment, maybe they got laughs, but what did they say?
Mhm.
Whereas there may be somebody who had something that a little more resonates. And I'm not saying I average usually 60 to 90-minute presentations. Not everybody's going to be with me for every single second, but I know there are nuggets in everything that I do, that there's a little something for everybody to take away. And then hopefully I can keep them entertained and, engaged for the rest of the time. But nobody's going to take every lesson I'm dropping on them. But again, so I think content is more important than delivery. You want both. You want a nice combination of both, but an audience will be more forgiving if your content is good. They may, applaud and give you the good stuff right off the bat if the delivery's great, but they're not going to remember anything you said.
Yeah. Now, what about storytelling? Now, everyone is saying that that's huge. That's the buzzword for now. Tell a story that helps, get the audience on your side. And what do you think? I know you had said humor before. You like to start off with humor, but what do you think about storytelling?
Well, my humor definitely comes across in storytelling. I mean, if as we had talked about before we went live, is calling me a motivational speaker okay? Yes, it is. Some people, the whole living in a van down by the river thing, that the old Chris Farley bit from Saturday Night Live. But I fully accept that title. But what I will also call myself sometimes is a storyteller, because that's the way I try to relate the information I'm getting across. That's the way I try to relate the messages, the lessons are through stories. Some of them are personal stories for me, things that have happened in my life. Some of them are observations I've seen from things from others. But I think we all have stories. When you go out to a dinner with friends, you're going to tell stories.
Mhm.
When you're sitting around with your family at a holiday meal around a table, you're going to tell stories. When you're talking on the phone with a friend, you're going to tell stories. Everybody tells stories. Find a way to take the message of whatever it is that you're trying to get across, again, whether it's you as a personal brand, or something motivational or inspirational, or it's something you're trying to sell. If you tell them a story, they'll remember. Everybody's ears always perk up, and not that you're going to actually start stories this way, but everybody's ears always perk up when somebody says once upon a time, because a story's coming. And so if you say, well, there was this one time, and people go, oh, we have a story coming. Okay. And they will ready themselves for that. And again, I'm not saying that's the way you start your stories, but if it comes across like you're just telling stories. Again, one of the highest compliments I can be paid after a presentation is somebody saying, did you prepare that? You just make that up there, because it just seemed like you were just telling us stories. That means it's natural and it's flowing. I could have told those stories 1,000 times, but because I've told them 1,000 times and they're still fresh to me when I retell them, because we've all got stories in our lives we've retold 1,000 times. You've got to make the material that you deliver when you're going live virtually or in front of an audience, those stories you've told 1,000 times. You can tell the story without even thinking. You can add a little extra nuance here and there. You can go off in a different direction if you need to, but stories are what sell things. Stories help engage people. So yeah, I use humor in the stories I tell. When I did stand up for a short period of time, and I would have been considered more of a storytelling stand up instead of a setup joke punchline kind of, that wasn't my thing. I had bits that were like 3, 4, 5 minute stories instead of joke, 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 joke. That's not the way I roll.
Mhm. Now, you mentioned the difference about virtual and in person. So, can we talk about some tips for virtual public
For
speaking?
sure. What do you need to know?
So, what is the difference? Is it any difference for in person and virtual?
Oh geez. Yeah. I mean, my calendar completely vanished like in March of 2020. Everything that I had booked was gone. And I, along with a lot of other people in my industry, started to worry. I was fortunate enough that a gig that I had booked switched very quickly to virtual within 2 weeks, like end of March. I think it was March 30th, 2020. I had my first virtual gig. I didn't know how to set up the room or do my lights, and kind of figured that all out. But for virtual, on the technical side, you want your camera just above your eye level. Nobody wants to be looking down at that camera. That's not a good look for anybody. But I keep it just above eye level, so I'm not like looking up like this, but I'm just slightly looking up. It's a good angle for me personally, so that's where I put it. I prefer to stand because when I'm on a stage, I stand up. So this is a standing desk situation that I have here, so that my computer is right at my eye level, but I'm walking around. I can be doing my thing because I tend to pace and move around a little bit. You want to just make sure your lighting is natural. But the biggest thing, I mean, when I did that first virtual speech, I was exhausted at the end of the hour because there was nothing to fill my tank. When I'm in a room full of people, I feed off that audience, whether it's a laugh or getting that look of recognition when somebody's really, understanding a message that you're giving or a story that you're telling. That fills your tank up when your energy gets low. I realized very quickly, oh, I have none of that. I'm out here on my own.
Yeah.
And so I came to a point, and maybe this is just mental gymnastics, but honestly, it's helped me to thrive in the speaking world over the last 17 months because I've had one of my better years of my 32-year career during the pandemic. And I think that part of it is just, again, it's that connection piece. So I came to this understanding in my head. What I thought about is standing in front of an audience of, say, 500 people, which would be an average size for me. Standing in front of a crowd of about 500 people, maybe I'm a half hour into the presentation. You got the type A people in the room. They're loving it. They're there for it. You could be reading the phone book. They're going to be down. They're like, do the B's. The A's were awesome. They're excited about it. But it's about 30 minutes in, and there's that person maybe halfway back in the audience. Not to say they were disengaged, but maybe they weren't 100% with you up to this point. And then you drop some piece of knowledge. You do a little mic drop moment at the end of a story, whatever it may be. And you see that person with recognition and feeling go, and really like they get it for the first time, what you're talking about. And I know for me as a speaker, all I want in the world in that moment is to go, everybody get out. And I just want to tell that one person the rest of my stories. I just want to sit face to face, hold their hands and go, this is for you, because I know they need to hear it. So what I came to realize is, as long as I am looking with intention and purpose and intensity and authenticity at this little green light right here, and that's what I focus my attention on, I could be speaking to a virtual audience of, I did a conference last summer that was on and off 10 to 12,000 people virtually. I'm not telling 10 to 12,000 people. I'm telling one person at a time, 10 or 12,000 times, because that's the way they're receiving it. Somebody's looking at the screen, and if you're looking at the camera, you're looking them in the eye. And you don't get, in an audience of 500 people, the opportunity to look every single person in the eye. So this is an advantage. So whenever I look at this, I get pumped up because I'm telling one person my stories today. I'm just doing it a whole bunch of times, but that one person, and that can help them feel that connection, and it can help whatever material you're delivering to resonate. But I would be comfortable, if you've done this kind of thing before, recreate the scenario. I uniform myself like a superstitious baseball player. I wear the same clothes whenever I speak. And so I put those clothes on, even speaking virtually. I'm in my apartment, in my office right now. I can go and make a sandwich in a couple of minutes if I want to, but it doesn't mean I'm going to be, wearing pajama pants. No, I've got on the shoes that I wear. I've got the bracelet I always put on. I don't need to be wearing my watch right now, but I like to have the weight of it. I would have it on during a presentation. I put on for us tonight something that I would wear for a presentation because it puts me in the right mindset. So you got to recreate the scenario and just look in earnest at that camera and know you're not telling however many people are on the Zoom or, the YouTube live or whatever it is. You're telling one person. And that can really have such a great impact virtually, for sure.
And I'm glad you said that about the one person, because so many people get intimidated, especially my audience. They get intimidated because they think that, they're talking to, maybe 10 or 15 or 25, 30 people, or even 5,000. I'm like, no, just focus on that. Like you're talking to one person. And they also, get tripped up if they're doing a live. Like right now, I have you to feed off, but sometimes I do another show called Shooting the Shits with Rosie, and it's just me. And sometimes you go live, it's just you. And so you have to think that way and not try to think that you're talking to 500 people, just that one person. And that helps with the nerves because you're not, your mind is not going all over the place. So
Yeah.
I'm glad that you said that.
Well, and I mean, there's been times I prefer not to, but with some of my clients over the past year and a half, they've asked for a pre-recorded presentation and that they'll show later. So that's even, yeah, because I'll sometimes do live questions via text in my YouTube lives or whatever if I'm presenting for an organization, and I'll broadcast through a private link in my channel and they'll be able to interact that way. But if I'm doing a pre-record, I got nothing. It's just me speaking to the void. But again, it's imagining that one person. And I always try to imagine I'm speaking to one person who needs to hear it, whatever it is that I'm delivering. And again, for your audience, whether it's a story they're telling, a message they're trying to relate, a product they're trying to sell, a brand they're trying to build, imagine the person who needs to hear it most. Look in earnest at that camera and do not break eye contact with it. And just tell that one person. And I mean, if they need help, honestly, silly little tricks. Here, I'll reach up here. For 16 months, I've had this over my camera. That little Post-it note is on the back of my laptop over my camera. One, to go, hey, look over here. And two, don't forget to smile when you're talking.
Yeah.
And that's just my little reminder. That has been that Post-it note. It sits right here on my desk. Oh, it's showtime. Got to throw that up there, and there it stays.
Yeah. Now, speaking off the cuff, do you have any tips for that?
For speaking off the cuff, I mean, I guess it depends on the scenario. So say we'll use an educational example with my world where I would maybe go in and speak to a high school. And then perhaps their student council would have me come in and do a student leadership workshop because I came out of a student leadership background when I was in high school. So the presentation in front of the school is going to be kind of more of a show, for lack of a better term. I'm going to tell the stories and relate the message they've asked me to relate based on the conversations we've had before the gig. So I'll go in and do that and tell the stories great. Then I go into a smaller room with, 15 or 30 people, and I'm going to, student leaders at the school, maybe it's up to 100, and I'm going to do more of a workshop. That's just kind of off the cuff riffing. For that, I know in the toolbox I have up here, I have hours worth of stories. Off the cuff is easy if you've got lots of stuff rattling around in there. If you know, okay, I'm going to go do something, and there may be an off the cuff situation, I've got maybe 30 minutes worth of stuff, then you tell them we can maybe do 30 minutes at most, or 15 or 20 or whatever it may be. Otherwise, you're going to be digging deep into the vault and having to do things complete. Like, I know anybody asks a question in a scenario that I'm familiar with, I'm going to have 12 different answers I can pull from. But there's nothing wrong with being off the cuff. That sometimes some of the greatest little one-line jokes or little bits or turns of phrase that I do in a presentation come from something off the cuff. Like maybe in that moment, something happened and I turned the phrase a little bit differently in the story than I had before, and I could feel a different reaction from an audience. So going off the cuff works, but again, it's the familiarity of I've got the bones of this thing, and then we're just building on top of it. But if the bones, there's that song that came out last year. If the bones are good, then everything else is going to be fine. So if the bones of your presentation are good, you've got a solid structure, a solid foundation there, you're okay to go off the cuff because you've got solid foundation, a solid structure for sure.
Yeah. Now, how do you perfect your speaking? Do you watch your replays at all?
Well, that's been an advantage, I guess, through doing things virtually because of the software that I use to broadcast. It automatically saves them for me and I can download them. I never used to. There would be times, especially if I was doing multiple presentations in a day, I'd walk away from a gig and go, I said something off the cuff up there. What the heck did I say again? And I can't. And then the hope is when I get back into that exact moment in the presentation, it'll come to me again. And
Mhm.
usually that happens, but I know there are lines that just, they were gone and they never came back again. So I have the game tape for the stuff that I've done for the last 16 months. Have I watched all of them? No. But if I'm thinking to myself, yeah, that was really good. What did I say in the middle there? I'll go review the tape and check. Early in my career, that would have been a very expensive proposition to be recording stuff because you would have had a big camcorder thing that somebody would have had to do. But I will take feedback. I love if I have a scenario where there are other people in my industry, speaker friends. If I'm in a town speaking where I know I've got a speaker friend, I will A, ask them to lunch, and B, say, hey, do you want to come to the gig? I'm
Mhm.
trying out some new things. I would love your thoughts, and have them take notes. I've done the same for several. Ask a trusted friend to
Mhm.
come in, sit in, and take some notes. Even if they're not in the industry, that will tell you what they got from what you were saying. And if you're going, well, that's not what they're supposed to get from what I'm saying, you need to change something. But
Mhm.
yeah, now I will definitely review tape for something that I thought was a pretty good show. I would also think during this last 16 months, I was talking with a speaker friend of mine about this just a couple of weeks ago, that I think I've maybe got a little braver in terms of new material virtually, because in trying out new material before, I'd think, okay, I've got a new 5-minute piece that I like. I'm going to shoehorn it into another presentation. So I've got an hour. I'm going to shorten up a couple of other stories. I'm going to wedge this in here just to road test it, see how it goes. And I could get 2 minutes in. And if I in my mind go, this isn't working, I would pull the ripcord and go and just go on to the next thing, create a little, transitional statement. But I would bail out from a bit that I didn't think was working. I have no immediate audience response with this. So I feel like I'm taking some swings with material that I maybe wouldn't have taken before because I don't have that response. So I'm just trusting, yeah, what I've written is worthy, and I'm just going to do it and then hope for feedback. And again, if I know there's somebody on the call who is a friend or somebody I'm familiar with, please take some notes. Please let me know what you think. Feedback is always the best way to do it.
Yeah, no, I so agree. And I am just a huge proponent of watching your replays because you learn so much. If it's like the other day, like one of my lights wasn't positioned right. So I was just like, oh, okay, well, then I know next time to position it,
Sure.
or just the arms or anyway. I just love just watching. You just learn so much of good things too. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Because you want to take notes of the things that you're doing well and continue those. But then if you have areas of improvement, it's great to get those little nuggets and try to adjust some things going forward.
for sure. And I know a lot of people from in my stand-up days that would bring a little recorder and put it at the back of the room and just record their set. I know a guy like any like Chris Rock and Jerry Seinfeld and all these kind of people that they would talk about going to a club and recording their set and then studying it, refining it, because that's what you've got to do. But at the end of the day, you've got to actually be doing it. You can write and write and write and write until your fingers bleed. But if you don't get up and say it out loud, either virtually or in front of a group of people, you're never going to know how it sounds coming out of your mouth, how it lands with an audience. You've got to actually get up and start saying it. And I mean, again, even in this virtual world, if you want to prepare yourself, just open up QuickTime or something on your computer, hit record, and just do it for nobody, because that's what it's going to feel like anyway.
Yeah.
So you
Oh,
might
yeah.
as well get used to it. And then you can watch it back and go, okay, well, what am I doing with my face there? Why am I not looking at the camera? As you said, oh, I need to adjust that light. I mean, I just adjusted before we came on because last presentation I did, I thought I had these things marked well, but it was a little hot on one side. So I adjusted, and that's what you learn. So
Yeah. So what's next for you and how can we stay connected with you?
what's next for me? Well, continuing to speak virtually. I mean, corporate audiences, parent groups, conferences, schools, anything like that, colleges, universities. That's what I do. I am ready, willing, and able to do stuff. There's all kinds of information on my website in terms of some of the work that I've done, and also how to get a hold of me at Ian Tyson, IANTYSON. It's right there, .ca. iantyson.ca. At Ian Tyson is my Instagram and my Twitter. So that's a pretty easy way of getting a hold of me. And Ian Tyson Speaker is my Facebook. I do have a new project that might be of interest to some of your audience. Is a new company that I started that's kind of this team thing. You're probably familiar with Cameo, the video service, where it's like celebrities do little videos for people.
I've heard of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So basically what I've created is kind of like Cameo, but for motivational speakers. And it's called Get Your Pep Talk. So if you go to getyourpeptalk.com, we've got a team of about 45 speakers from across North America and around the world, all professionals in their industries, and they're storytellers and they're advocates and they're specialists. And you could go on and order for yourself, for a family member, for a friend, for a Father's Day, Mother's Day, birthday, Christmas, graduation, saying thank you, expressing some gratitude, helping somebody who's down in a deep hole and just needs to get out. It can be that voice of a trusted stranger that or an experienced stranger that can maybe lift them up. You can have a professional motivational speaker give a 2 to 3 minute pep talk for yourself or somebody else. And so it's a great service, and I'm really proud of the team we've put together. And that's one of my new projects I'm working on now. But everything, all the links to all that stuff is on iantyson.ca.
Wonderful, wonderful. So that's all we have for this episode of The Bandwidth. Thank you, Ian, for being on. We so appreciate it. And as I always say when I end, your voice needs to be heard because it matters to someone. You can do it. Stop waiting. Start your go live journey now. Please DM me on Facebook or IG and let me know how I can personally support you. I want to thank the Style True team for producing this show. Subscribe to this channel. If you are not, make sure that you click the thumbs up button and turn on the notification. And if you feel like someone needed to hear this, please share the link with that one person. And also, we ask that you comment your biggest takeaway. Follow me on Facebook at Rosie Faulkner and IG at Faulkner_Rosie. And if you are ready to go live, sign up to get my 3 must-have tools. The link is below. Until next time.